Hey everybody, welcome to The Sweet I Am. I'm Dr. Veronica Tedderton.
And I'm Dr. Carla Evans. We're two psychologists who value family and chasing a deeper relationship with God. And this show, it's your therapy.
That's right, because every week we're going to give you practical strategies to help you grow, heal, and live life free and full. That is, free of heartache and full of purpose and passion.
Yeah, so welcome and thank you for joining our show, because we are the sweetest show around.
Because it don't get any sweeter.
All right, so welcome back to our show here on The Sweet I Am. We are so glad you're part of the Sweet I Am family. We are who we are because of you.
Yes.
And if you're just joining The Sweet I Am, you'll know that just a little bit about our history. We've worked together as two clinical psychologists, and we are just in pursuit to develop more intimacy with God and create unity and humor, and talk about some just tough real life issues that we deal with every single day.
Absolutely.
We did radio for about 6 months, and now we've transitioned over to Facebook Live. So if you like what you see, comment, give a suggestion, and share it on your page. We're so glad that you've joined this evening, because tonight we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to every one of your hearts.
Yeah, because we're getting ready to drop the F-bomb.
Yeah, and the F-bomb is forgiveness.
Yeah.
So I don't know about for you, but I know that every single person that is watching and listening to us tonight can say, I have struggled at a time in my life with forgiving for whatever reason.
Yes.
And the reality is, you've had a reason to experience resentment. You've had a reason to have bitterness and fear. But at the end of the day, what do we do with it to help transform our lives? So perhaps you're the lady. I can remember a time when I was sitting and eating lunch with a lady, and she said to me, I never want to walk into the doors of a church again because I felt such shame. I felt that I was left out. No one went out of their way to welcome me or accept me into their family. I will never walk into the doors of a church again. That lady walked away with offense, with bitterness, and with some deep-rooted resentment. The problem with that we're going to get into tonight, and we're going to talk about ways to help finding forgiveness, and how it's really going to enhance your quality of life. Perhaps you're the young lady or the young man who said, you don't know my story. I went through life circumstances that not a single person can imagine that I went through.
Absolutely.
That's unfathomable.
Yeah, yeah, and we definitely have worked with clients who've had those life experiences, and there is a legitimate experience of bitterness, and because of the life circumstances that some of us have been through. And we just want to kind of help you to maybe change your kind of thinking about forgiveness, because oftentimes we believe that forgiveness is for the other person, and we don't want to give them jack. We don't want to give them any slack. We don't want to give them anything. But what we're going to discover today is that forgiveness is your remedy. It is not their treatment. And so we want to encourage you to have a different perspective of forgiveness so that you can let go of the bitterness, because perhaps you are the wife that has been married to your husband for 25 years, who you've just discovered that your husband has been having an extramarital affair and that he desires a divorce. Or maybe you're the person who's been overlooked on your job time after time, and you've put in for promotions, and you've been put off and put off and put off. And with each experience, the resentment and the bitterness towards those, your superiors, have grown. Those are just some of the circumstances, life circumstances of the clients that we deal with, and the life circumstances that we deal with in our own life as well.
Yeah, and just like you commented on, so often we need to look at how we redefine forgiveness, because we're thinking, well, that person or that group of people or those individuals don't deserve my forgiveness.
Yes.
But see, what forgiveness does is it changes you. It changes you from the inside to the out. And the best way that I know how to describe unforgiveness is like a disease. When you don't go in and pull out the infection, then it spreads through your body. And before you know it, your entire life is destroyed because of those walls of unforgiveness and bitterness that you've put up. And you've created now some paranoia, or you've created boundaries that should have never been there. Because of the feelings or the hurt that you experienced in your past, you're refusing to be vulnerable and to trust again. You're refusing to allow people to come into your life to have positive meaning.
Yeah, and bitterness really is wrath's little sister. And we want to kind of keep in mind that when you hold unforgiveness and bitterness in your heart, it really is just a wound that's infesting and growing deeper, that you're almost creating the perfect environment for it to grow. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's almost like you create this perfect environment for mold to grow. You know, like there's this dark, dank, musty place where this algae or this mold is growing. And that's what we do in our hearts. We can create a very palatable place for unforgiveness to grow, or we can clear that out. We can clean that out.
Rip out the roots.
That's right. And not allow unforgiveness to take root into our hearts. But the only way you'll do that, though, Carla, is if you really get the idea. See, because sometimes people feel like all they have is resentment. Like that's their weapon now.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's the only way that I can get back at you for what you've done for me, is that I hold this against you. But the reality is you got to get this. It is your pain. It causes you stress. It causes you depression. It causes you sadness. It creates a negative life experience for yourself. And so if you really get this, that forgiveness is less about being nice to the other person and more about, it's a selfish gesture. How about that? That forgiveness is really you being selfish in that I'm going to make sure that I take care of myself. That I'm not going to allow myself to fester and to continue to grow in this moldy way.
And part of this idea of positive psychology is self-care, taking care of you. And these are some of the steps that you can do that. And just like you mentioned, Veronica, so often we think, well, you don't know what this perpetrator did to me.
Right.
You don't know the things that I went through. You don't know the circumstances that I've had. But at the end of the day, those people are long gone. They're living their life. They're doing their thing. And there's even times when people don't even know that they've offended you. But you've carried that sense of offense for months, for years, for decades, and it's done nothing but destroy your well-being. So I've heard stories of clients or stories of friends where they've said, well, I become offended and I didn't know how to manage it, and this went on for 2 years, 3 years. The perpetrator, the person who did it, they might have even innocently done something that they didn't even know about. But because of your unwillingness to forgive them, you have allowed yourself to go to a dark place. Now let's talk a little bit about the process of forgiveness, because the process of forgiveness doesn't always look the way we teach our children that it looks. I'm sorry. Do you forgive me? I forgive you.
You walk away and everything's... We're good.
Everything's
squared away, right?
The process of forgiveness looks way different, especially when you may never see that person again.
Right.
So what do you do?
Right. So let's say, for example, you have somebody that has wronged you that is, let's just say they're not even alive, okay? Or that they're a person who is not seeking forgiveness. How about that? And you yourself want to be free. So one of the things that you can do for yourself, I love the fact that you said that it's a process. Go into this with that expectation, please, because it is a process. It is going to take time. It's going to take effort, and it's going to take consistent effort. Okay. And so what that means is one of the things that you might want to start with is stop retelling the story. Start there. And because so many times we rehash, and I mean rehash, and that we can't wait to meet somebody new, so we can tell
we camp out there.
Yes,
it's like let me just camp and let me just spend all week here, and then I'm not. What you may think in your mind, you don't know what's happening subconsciously, but in your mind you're thinking, oh, I just need to share my story.
I'm just venting.
Right. But before you know it, you've got a whole camp of allies, a whole camp of individuals that are now bombarding with you. I can't believe he did that. I can't believe she did this.
Right.
And before you know, you have spoken death over that situation. Right. And you have caused that disease to infect not just yourself, but the people that are surrounding you.
Yeah, it's fuel to a bonfire is essentially what it is. If you have a resentment, you already have an ignited emotion. You don't need to pour gasoline on it by continuing to retell it. Now, we say that, but what we're talking about is retelling it to friends and everybody else. But what we're not talking about is the retelling that might go on in the context of therapy with a therapist.
Right.
Because that's very different.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we might encourage people to do in therapy, depending on the circumstance, is to share their emotions about it. Because for some people, they avoid all discussions of it. They don't want to think about it. They think that their life is perfectly fine. I've put that person and my issues with them in a closet, and I've hidden it.
I've swept it under the rug, and nobody else can see the pain that I've gone through.
Right. But the reality is that your pain is more visible than you ever really know.
Yeah.
And in that context, Carla and I in our therapy sessions may encourage that client to talk about it. So it's a different kind of context. You got to kind of know or how it applies to you.
And if counseling or going that route is what you need, then obviously we advocate for that, because the importance of you getting the mental health help that you need, it's crucial. It can be crucial for the healing process. Because for some of you, the process to forgiveness is definitely not going to happen overnight. And you might even be saying, well, that sounds all good in theory, that we can forgive and we can move forward, but it's just not going to happen for me.
Right. And there are some pains that we are going to experience that we will be able to work through on our own. That, with time and with prayer and with the positive support of our loved ones, we'll be able to work through some of those pains. But there are other pains that we're going to experience in life that the bitterness and the resentment are so strong that we may need outside counsel, whether or not it be through our church, clergy, or through professional mental health personnel as well. Whatever the case may be, just recognize that what we said before, it is a process. And at some point, you need to know whether or not you need to seek the help from other people, or if you legitimately got this one and you can handle it.
But you also need to know that if you've experienced something to that level, you are not supposed to live your life in unforgiveness.
That's right.
So it doesn't say I have an excuse now to live my life with bitterness and resentment and putting up these walls. Because what happens is once you're able to walk through the appropriate steps of forgiveness, then that is what's going to free up the energy that you have to live a more fulfilling life.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that that's clear as well, because so often I want to validate the pain that you've experienced, and I want you to know that it's real in your life, and you need to go through the steps to get the help that you need. But don't walk around thinking, well, I have an excuse to not forgive, because that will ultimately destroy your life. Right. And there's so much more to your life. And if you can free up that energy to be able to experience that, you're going to find a renewed sense of life and a renewed sense of purpose.
Right. And connected to that, as we talk about seeking help and getting assistance from others, let's just not forget God here and seeking God for the grace to forgive.
Yeah.
There is nothing that you will do more challenging than forgive, and in our own right, we're incapable of it.
Yeah.
We really need the grace of God to be able to forgive, because it is not in our human nature to forgive. What our human nature instead is to strike back. When I've been hurt and injured, to strike back with equal or greater force so that I've won.
But you may say, well, that's not me. I'm not an aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're an internalizer
yes.
then. And that's just as negative.
Yeah.
Because no, I'm not striking back, and no, I'm not outwardly expressing my negativity and my frustration or agitation with this individual. But you're stuffing the pain. And I'm telling you, sister, stuffing that pain, it shows on your outward.
Right.
People can see that all over your life and all over your body, and it's just a matter of time that you're going to push it so far. I kind of use this descriptive of a stick of dynamite.
Oh, yeah.
When you've got a little box of dynamite, you've got a lot of stuff shoved in a really tight box, but before you know it, it explodes. So enough pressure put on it and you're going to find yourself erupting. And so what I really believe as we walk through, letting down those strongholds of resentment and letting go of unforgiveness, that you're going to find that you may not forget it because some of those things may be really painful in your life.
Yeah.
But the goal is this. The analogy that I give is that you no longer have an open wound, but you now just have a scar. And the scar is a reminder that you went through some very tough life circumstances, but it's not an open wound that every time you go through a difficult situation, you're ripping off that scab and having to re-experience that pain, but that you're able to say, I went through it. Some of the experiences I went through, I should have never had to experience. And I can see that scar as a reminder of my pain, but I know that I'm not operating in a place of pain and a place of bitterness.
Yeah, so we want to encourage you to begin the process of forgiving and do so by seeking support. Seeking support first from God, our Father, who gives us the grace to be able to do so. Seeking the support from loved ones and also perhaps from professionals that might be able to guide us down this path of forgiveness. And also seeking, maybe there are, maybe self-help books and other experiences that will walk you down a path of forgiveness.
And some of the more simple things, which may not seem simple to you, are learning how to dispute those irrational beliefs. Because what I mean by the simple things is we may create offense with someone around us, or we may think, well, she should have done this and she did it this way, or I can't believe that he doesn't recognize that I need this and this and this. We sometimes get in that, well, you should know me already. I don't have to explain or communicate my concerns. It might do some benefit for you if you step back and say, wait a second, let me reevaluate and challenge this irrational belief. And what we do in psychology, we call them camera checks, right?
Yep.
So I say, well, this is what really happened. Well, what would a camera say if they were looking at the situation? It may not say the same thing.
Right.
And then perhaps you're able to look at it from a new perspective.
Right.
And then be able to give some grace on the situation or the person that has offended you.
Absolutely. So we want to encourage you to forgive for a couple of reasons. One, it is tied to your emotional well-being. It is also tied to your physical well-being. The weight of forgiveness is stress, okay? And stress wears your body down physically and emotionally. So consider that also as a motivator to get this monkey off your back. Because that's essentially what it is. It is a monkey off your back.
It's a heavy weight that's weighing you down. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we don't want to minimize the challenge of that release, of letting go of that monkey. We don't want to minimize that because it is a legitimate struggle to release yourself from that. Sometimes people can clothe themselves in resentment and it becomes so comfortable for them that they can't imagine life without it. What would I be if I didn't have an identity of bitterness towards the person who hurt me? And they don't want to let it go. But if you have a desire for less anxiety in your life, a greater spiritual and psychological well-being, healthier relationships,
improved immunity,
less
likely to get sick.
You're not going to get sick as much because, again, what that unforgiveness is doing is it is wearing and tearing on your body. It is almost as if you're in a car, and you know how you can wear a car out by revving it, constantly rev. At a certain point, that car begins to diminish its capacity to function the way that it should because you've got it revved. And that's essentially what unforgiveness can do for us in our life, is it creates that experience in our bodies. And it begins to deteriorate our bodies faster emotionally and physically than it should.
So now that we've talked about, number one, validating your pain. Okay, so offenses and hurt and resentment and things that have come up in our life, we've dealt with real issues. We're human, and we've dealt with some really tough issues from really bad circumstances, depending on your situation, what you've been through. But we've also talked about how unforgiveness and bitterness can really take a toll on your body. And so we want you to know that we're coming from a place of love, and we want you to really reevaluate, what is it that I am having a hard time getting over? And what do I need to do? What steps do I need to take? And then we've talked about when you truly have the gift of forgiveness, what that frees up for you in your life.
Yeah.
You begin to not only have increased immunity, increased physical health, increased quality of living, increased identity, it improves your own self-esteem. Because so often when we're dealing with unforgiveness and bitterness, the way we view those around us is oftentimes how we view ourselves.
Absolutely.
So we create this sense of kind of a negative identity, this negative self-talk, this negative view of who we are. But we want to talk with you about some of the just basic steps to be able to forgive someone. And one of the first things that I would want to share with you is this. You have to identify what you're experiencing. Just like you mentioned earlier, sometimes we say, well, no, I'm angry. I'm just mad. I'm just an angry person. Or, oh no, everything in my life is great. You don't need to know any of my business. I'm going to carry this mask and I'm going to wear it the rest of my life. But if you don't identify there's been a problem, there's been a hurt, there's been an offense, there's been a pain, then you're never going to be able to address it, deal with the root issue, and then move forward. See, so often we scrape the surface. And that's what we do by saying, I'm sorry, I forgive you, let's move on. But when you begin to talk about the root issues, that's where you're going to find resolve in your life.
And one thing that I can say that's related to that I certainly have experience with, when you talk about the issue of forgiveness, oftentimes I'll dismiss that conversation in my mind like, oh, that's for somebody else, because I don't have bitterness and I don't have any forgiveness in my heart. And then the Holy Spirit will tap me, knock, 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 and there will be a situation or a circumstance or something that will come to mind, and I'll think, oh, am I? Did I thought I forgave them for that. I didn't think that was something that I was still harboring in my heart. So one of the things too, along with what she just mentioned, is really evaluate your heart. Clean out your heart. Go into your heart's closet space and really shed the light into the dark places so you can see who maybe you've got held hostage in that closet. Because I guarantee you, a lot of times you may feel like, I'm good, I don't have anybody in my closet. But the reality is, if you were to really shed the light, if you were to allow God, if you were to sit still quietly and ask God to reveal to you what's or who's in your closet, you may be very surprised with what you discover.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
You may have somebody in bondage in your closet of unforgiveness that's been there for 20 years and you have never really realized it. Yeah, so anytime we talk here on The Sweet I Am, it's all about self-analysis. Taking a look at little old me, what's going on in me. And if I find myself tripped up day after day and I'm dealing with these roadblocks day after day, I might need to do some inward looking. I might need to take a look at really what's happening in my life. So I want to offer through these suggestions that you also begin looking through the eyes of compassion. And another term that we use in psychology is situational versus dispositional. And so often when someone offends us, it becomes dispositional. Well, they must have a character flaw, or must have been on purpose, or they must have been doing something to destroy us. But if we make a mistake, then it's always situational, right? I woke up late that day.
I have a good excuse. And, I can't believe you would think that I thought that about
that's
you.
ordinarily not how I am, but the circumstances led me to be that way that day.
So just some basic tips on, if you're going to look at your own self with situational disposition, then we want to encourage you to look at others with situational disposition too. And that teaches us to be able to have that grace and that compassion. It's not to say that whatever happened to you in your life is okay. We want to get that straight. It's not to say that the circumstances that surround your situation were your fault or that you deserve to go through that pain. But what we are trying to say is having a heart and a mindset and a lens of compassion is ultimately going to free you up to live a life that's much more fulfilling than you could have ever imagined.
Right. It goes back to this being a selfish gesture. It is not for you to create a sense of compassion so that you can feel sorry for them. It is so that you can have a sense of understanding so that you can be free.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, it's just, I think, knowing that forgiveness is not always the words that you're saying. It's not just speaking these words to your offender. Sometimes that's not necessary, and sometimes you don't even have the opportunity to do that. We work with clients every day who say, you know, the person who offended me is no longer alive. Or the person who hurt me is no longer in my presence. So sometimes it's even going through the process of writing the letter to the deceased person and putting out all of your feelings and expressing the pain that you've gone through for so long and being able to address that, hey, this is what I've dealt with. This is how I've felt hurt in the past. But I want to be able to forgive you. You're going to find yourself in a place that's going to send you down the path of healing. And that's ultimately what we want for you with a Sweet I Am.
Yeah, and one final thing that we want to make sure that you know as you're beginning this journey of forgiveness, please know that your journey of forgiveness should not be contingent upon apologies. You may never get an apology, and you can't make that a factor in whether or not you proceed and continue in your journey of forgiveness. Start your journey out with the expectation that you will never get an apology. You will never get the words that you've longed for. I'm sorry. I hurt you. I let you down. I betrayed you. You may never hear those words, and so you really kind of don't want to set yourself up for a forgiveness process that's tied to you getting the apology or sense of acknowledgement. You know, because sometimes that's all we want. Can you just acknowledge you did me wrong? And some people won't even acknowledge. They will, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do nothing. That's how you perceive it, but that's not how I intended it. They'll do that real quick. That's not how I intended it. That's just how you perceive it. And it's the most invalidating experience if you've been hurt. But you have to know that you are not going to get that from everyone and from everybody that's in your closet. So you have to begin this process with the mindset that I'm going to forgive
regardless of the outcome.
Regardless of the outcome.
And at the end of the day, a forced apology is not going to do anything for your unforgiveness anyway.
No.
It's truly not. So a forced apology or making someone do, we need to know really quick that we cannot control other people's behaviors.
Yes, you're
we
absolutely
are only
right.
in control of ourselves. And so if we had that, I can promise you we'd be making lots of money as psychologists today.
Right?
We'd wave that magic wand and we would fix all the people that have done all of these hurts and all of these pains in your life. But we can only be responsible for us. So take responsibility for us. Take a look at maybe what is it that I can change, and then ultimately what is it that I'm hanging on to that I'm not even aware of that's really causing some destruction in my life, because it can also be causing some destruction in what could be a meaningful relationship with others. You're putting up walls and you're putting up boundaries that you're missing out on life. You're missing out on being able to create those intimate relationships with others and with God. You're seeing God from a different lens, and we want you to see Him as a loving, caring, compassionate God that cares about you intimately, personally, and cares about your own situation. So thank you for joining the Sweet I Am today in our discussion of forgiveness. There's a lot of people pained by the actions of others, and we are hoping that there was some sense of relief. At least a path really for you to follow, because forgiveness is not something you're not going to find a great deal of relief in a show that you watch. It's in your process and the work towards your own forgiveness. So we hope that we've created at least a path for you to begin that journey. And we hope that you'll follow that path further with the assistance of others, whether or not it be support of professionals or friends or whatever the case may be. But we just want you to begin the journey today and recognize that that journey is not for them, but it is for you. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to share it with others, because we are a growing community of people. And we're so glad to be chasing intimacy with God with you. And we're so glad to be sharing in the healing of lives and growing together. Yeah, thank you for being a part tonight. Again, if you have a comment, suggestion, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to share the show. We hope we've been an encouragement to you, and we ultimately hope that you could be able to let go of some of those chains of unforgiveness and live a life fullness and with healing and with hope.
Absolutely.
Have a good evening. Thanks for joining.
We'll see you next Thursday, 9 p.m. The Sweet I Am on Facebook Live.
See you later. Good night.
Bye, everybody.